There was a time when three names ruled every kid's living room: Disney, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network. They weren't just television shows, they were kingdoms. They gave us our first heroes, our first jokes, our first soundtracks, and maybe even our first dreams. But now, they're barely recognizable. The magic is gone. The voices feel forced. The ratings are in freefall. This is a story of how childhood's greatest empires fell. This is the downfall of Disney, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network. Let's go back to the early 2000s, the time of flip phones, LimeWire, Tsunami at midnight, and snack breaks during commercial. If you're a kid growing up in the late 90s or early 2000s, you weren't just watching TV, you were living inside a culture moment, and at the center of it all was three giants: Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network. Each one had a unique voice, a personality, a soul. Now, let's start with Disney Channel. This was the era of Even Stevens, Kim Possible, Lizzie McGuire, and That's So Raven. These shows were bright, colorful, funny, but also relatable. They made the average kid feel like the main character. Raven could see the future. Kim could save the world after school. Lizzie was just trying to survive middle school, and with her animated consciousness tagging along. And then came Hannah Montana, a literal phenomenon. The double life of a pop star was the perfect fantasy, and Disney milked it into a billion-dollar empire. But at its core, these shows worked because they were about kids being kids. The problems felt real, the friendships felt real, and the jokes were timeless. Meanwhile, over on Nickelodeon, things were a little more chaotic, a little more orange. Nick was messy and proud of it. They celebrated boogers, burps, and bad behavior. But beneath the slime was some of the best writing in television. You had Rugrats, Doug, Hey Arnold, cartoons that balanced childish fun with deep emotional undertones. Hey Arnold, for example, tackled homelessness, immigration, bullying, while all keeping a jazzy vibe and that iconic football-shaped head. Then came a live-action renaissance: The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Ned's Declassified, Zoe 101, and of course, SpongeBob SquarePants. Let's be real, SpongeBob wasn't a cartoon, it was a cultural force. Premiered in 1999, and by the mid-2000s, it was everywhere. Memes before memes, gifs before social media, codes will repeat today. I'm ready. Is mayonnaise an instrument? I wumbo, you wumbo, he, she, we wumbo. SpongeBob was lighting in a bottle, and it hasn't been recaptured since. And then there was this wild card, the Cartoon Network. When Nickelodeon was wild and Disney was polished, Cartoon Network was creative chaos. This was the home of weird geniuses and unfiltered imagination. Dexter's Laboratory, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Ed, Ed and Eddie, the Powerpuff Girls, and Johnny Bravo. They pushed the envelope, sometimes dark, sometimes absurd, always unique. And then, when Cartoon Network Friday's block hit, it was event television, a weekly celebration of the weirdest, most wonderful animation on air. Later came Samurai Jack, Teen Titans, Justice League, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, stylized, cinematic, often emotional, and then Tsunami for the anime kids, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, One Piece. It was a getaway drug into a whole new world of storytelling. Here's the thing, however, these networks weren't just giving us shows, they were building universes. They had style, identity, cohesion. You could recognize that Disney Channel original movie by its tone alone. You could feel when something was a Cartoon Network show. And most importantly, they respected the audience. Kids weren't treated like walking dollars. They were treated like people, with imagination, with intelligence, with taste. These networks weren't just pipelines of content. They were portals into magic. They didn't just watch TV. You looked forward to it. You scheduled your day around it. You memorized theme songs. You mimicked the characters. You quoted the jokes at lunch. This was the golden age, when the shows were great, the networks were thriving, and the audience were loyal. But all golden ages eventually fade, and the cracks were coming. As the 2010s rolled in, something changed. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, the magic started to die. But it didn't die because the audience grew up. It died because the networks did. The golden age gave way to a new era. One driven not by imagination, but by metrics. Not by stories, but by strategy. Not by creators, but by corporate executives. Let's start with Disney Channel. By the late 2000s, Disney had found a gold mine: musicals. High School Musical wasn't just a hit, it was a movement. Soundtracks went platinum, concert tours sold out, merchandise flew off shelves, so naturally, they doubled down. Then came Camp Rock, Teen Beach Movie, Lemonade Mouth, Descendants. Disney Channel became less about relatable storytelling and more about launching teen pop stars. The formula was simple: cute lead, catchy songs, cheesy romance, rinse and repeat. But with every copy, the heart faded. The characters got more generic, the jokes were forced, the shows started to feel like commercials and not stories. The focus had shifted from creating good shows to creating marketable stars. Nickelodeon followed a similar path, but even with messier results. After Drake and Josh and iCarly blew up, Nick realized, wait, these kids are making us millions. So they pushed them even harder. Victorious was born, then Sam and Cat, then Fred, the show. Yeah, that happened. You remember Fred, the high-pitched YouTube character? Nick saw the results and the viral numbers and thought, let's give him a series. It was terrible, and it flopped, but that didn't stop them. They launched a wave of forgettable, shallow live-action shows. Buck and Skinner's Epic Adventures, How to Rock, Marvin. Ever heard of them? No. Exactly, that's my entire point. These shows weren't made for kids. These shows were made for brands. Nick wanted the next Ariana Grande, the next Miranda Cosgrove, but not the next great show. And the writing, dumbed down. Jokes felt lazy. Characters felt like templates. Now let's move on to Cartoon Network. They made the boldest and worst move of all. They abandoned animation. In 2009, CN, aka Cartoon Network, announced they were expanding into live action. Yep, the home of Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack was now airing Destroy Build Destroy. Dude, what would happen? Hole in the wall. The fanbase, furious. The ratings, flatline. It was a complete rejection of everything Cartoon Network stood for. And even worse, in order to make room for these live-action flops, they started canceling promising animated series. Originality got shelved, artistic risks were shut down, and loyal viewers turned out. This is a chapter where the heart started slipping. In boardrooms, execs were asking, what story are we telling? They were asking, how many lunchboxes will sell? Short attention spans and quick cash. Everything felt hollow, and the audience noticed. Kids are smarter than they're given credit for. They know when they're being pandered to. They know when something is genuine, and the moment the network stopped respecting the viewers stopped respecting the network. The shift wasn't overnight, but it was undeniable. The animation budgets got slashed. The writers' room shrunk. The creativity dried up, and suddenly, the networks that once stood for bold storytelling and iconic characters started chasing trends instead of setting them. They traded legacy for likes, substance for safe content, and storytelling for strategy. This was no longer the golden age. This was the beginning of the fall. But the final blow hadn't come yet. That would arrive in the form of digital revolution, one that would change entertainment forever. Just as things were starting to slip, the digital storm hit. And for Disney, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network, it was a storm they never recovered from. Because this wasn't just a shift in content, this was a shift in culture. Welcome to the era of streaming. Let's be honest, it started slowly. A few Netflix DVDs orders here and there. Maybe you binge some old Disney shows on YouTube. But by 2013, Netflix was changing the game. And by 2015, the game was already over. Why wait for a show to come on at 4 p.m. when you could watch 8 episodes in a row at any time, anywhere, no ads, no waiting? Streaming didn't just beat cable, it obliterated it. Kids weren't racing home to watch Disney Channel anymore. They were swiping on iPads, opening up YouTube, scrolling on TikTok, watching content on demand. The idea of tuning in was gone. So was the idea of loyalty to a network. You didn't watch Disney Channel. You watched whatever was next on autoplay. And the big three, they weren't ready. Let's start with Disney. They made a drastic move, pulling back from cable and going all in on Disney+. They took content off Disney Channel and shoved it into their new streaming service. Shows like The Owl House and The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, were born there. Some were decent, some were forgettable, but none of them mattered because the audience had already scattered. And here's the kicker, even with Disney+, most of the originals got buried. The real kids were still on YouTube and TikTok. Nickelodeon tried something different. They made deals. They licensed Avatar: The Last Airbender to Netflix, and boom, it went viral. Memes, fan edits, cosplay. It was bigger than ever. But the problem? That wasn't a new show. That was a memory from 2005. Nick didn't follow up with anything on that level. They tried launching content on Netflix, then backtracked to Paramount Plus. When Viacom got greedy, they spread themselves too thin. No focus, no strategy, no direction. And what did they fall back on? SpongeBob. More spin-offs, more filler, no risk, no soul. Now, here's where it gets ugly. Cartoon Network. Already bruised by years of bad decisions, they entered a streaming era with no foundation. They were fooled into HBO Max, Then Warner Bros. Merged with Discovery. And in the chaos, Cartoon Network got gutted. Entire shows removed from the platform, no warning, no goodbye. Gone. Infinity Train wiped off the service. OKKO, Mao Mao, Final Space, erased. Fans and creators weren't just shocked, they were devastated. These weren't shows, these were people's lives, passion projects, years of work, deleted in a spreadsheet decision. Cartoon Network had once been a crown jewel of animation. Now it was collateral damage and corporate merger. And trying to chase the future, all the networks forgot what made them special in the past. Disney had the reach, but lost the charm. Nickelodeon had the brand, but lost identity. Cartoon Network had the talent, but lost the support. And while they scrambled to adapt, a new generation was already being raised by YouTube. Kids weren't watching serialized stories anymore. They were watching slime videos, Minecraft streams, unboxings, vlogs, TikTok dances, short bursts, no plot, no characters, just content. The streaming wars weren't just a business shift. They were an attention shift, a generation shift. And the big three, they couldn't keep up. Because you can't bench a memory. You can't algorithm your way into a child's heart. And you can't win the future if you're too busy cannibalizing your past. This was the moment where the downfall became inevitable. But it wasn't over. The final collapse was just around the corner. By the time we reached the early 2020s, it wasn't a slow fade anymore. It was collapse, free fall. The three times of our childhood, Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network weren't just struggling. They were crumbling. And not just on our screens, behind the scenes too. The foundations were broken. Let's start with Cartoon Network. Once a pioneer of animated brilliance, now a cautionary tale. In 2022, Warner Bros. Merged with Discovery. What followed was a bloodbath. Layoffs, budget cuts, entire divisions shut down. Cartoon Network Studios, the birthplace of Adventure Time, Regular Show, Steven Universe, was absorbed into Warner Bros. Animation. What used to be an independent creative engine was now just a branch in another blow to corporate tree. And the content, gone. Literally. Shows like Infinity Train, OKKO, Final Space, removed from streaming, scrubbed from existence, not canceled, erased. No reruns, no physical copies, no revenue. Creators were heartbroken. Fans were furious. Cartoon Network's soul had been gutted by suits who didn't care. Not about story, not about legacy, not about us. Over at Nickelodeon, it wasn't much better. The once great green machine had been reduced to a ghost town. They were still milking SpongeBob, still promoting Paw Patrol, but beyond that, a graveyard of failed pilots. New shows like The Barbarian and The Troll, Warped, The Girl Lele, gone almost as fast as they came. And for every hit, like The Loud House or Danger Force, there were 10 others with no marketing, no budget, and no chance. The network's identity, that rebellious, quirky, slime-filled magic, was replaced by cheap, algorithm-friendly filler. Nickelodeon had become a factory, one that didn't care about building icons, only IPs. And when ratings dipped, they didn't rebuild. They kept leaning onto the past. More SpongeBob, more iCarly spin-offs, more desperate nostalgia. And then there was Disney Channel. Remember when Disney ruled the tween world? Those days were over. Because with Disney Plus in full swing, Disney Channel became obsolete. Original programming dried up. No more breakout shows, no more iconic characters, no more theme song moments. Shows like Secrets of Sulphur Springs, The Villains of Valley View, Bunked, Season 75, they existed, but no one was watching. No one was talking. Even promising projects like The Owl House, one of the most critically acclaimed shows in years, got axed early. Why? Not because it wasn't good, not because kids didn't like it, but because executives didn't understand it, or worse, didn't want it. The same studio that brought us Kim Possible, Phineas and Ferb, Hannah Montana, was now letting content die quietly. And when Disney Plus became the priority, the actual channel became a zombie. Just reruns, just leftovers, just empty. The ones that once lit up every living room were barely breathing. The buildings were still there, the logo still existed, but the soul, gone. This was no longer a decline. It was a collapse. A failure of leadership, a failure of vision, a failure to respect the very people who made them legendary. But now, all that's left is a question. What happens after the downfall? The empire may have fallen, but the magic never truly died. Because even if the networks lost their way, the culture they created still lives on. Just not on TV. It lives in memes, in fan edits, in Reddit threads. And every, remember this, and every, they don't make them like this anymore. That feeling, that's legacy. Let's talk about Disney Channel. Even if the new shows didn't stick, the old ones, they never left us. We still quote That's So Raven. We still hum the Hannah Montana theme. We still remember the Sweet Life Room, numbered 613. Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens are no longer singing in the cafeteria, but we still know the words. And that speaks volumes, because those shows weren't just programming. They were moments in time, shared, cherished, and remembered. Nickelodeon, still iconic, but now it's more nostalgic than ever. So now we reach the end, not just of this video, but of an era. Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network. They weren't just networks, they were rituals. They shaped how we laughed, how we dreamed, and how we saw ourselves as kids. But now, they're ghosts. Still technically alive, still releasing content, but the soul was gone. The magic faded. So the question is, what happens now? Maybe we accept it. The golden ages don't last forever. That everything changes. That what we had was special because it was temporary. But here's the truth. The end of this story might be the beginning of ours. Because the kids who grew up watching these shows were now the adults. We're the artists, the animators, the writers, the directors. We remember what it feels like to care about characters, to wait all week for Friday night premieres, to cry during finales, to memorize theme songs like prayers. But this time is different. We're not waiting for executives to approve our stories. We're building them ourselves. On YouTube, on TikTok, on Substack, on Patreon, on streaming, on whatever platform lets us connect. We've seen what happens when corporations treat art like content, when heart gets replaced by branding. We don't want that. We want authenticity, we want emotion, and we want wonder. The kind of wonder we once felt watching Kim Possible save the world, or watching Aang unlock the Avatar state, or watching Samurai Jack face Aku. So the next time you hear that old Disney Channel wand sound, or see that Nickelodeon slime logo, or catch a glimpse of that black and white Cartoon Network checkerboard, don't feel sad. Feel grateful, because you were there. You witnessed the magic. You lived the golden age. And even if the networks forgot what they stood for, we didn't. The stories, the characters, the feeling, it's still alive, right there, in us. And that's something no algorithm, no merger, no cancellation can ever take away.